Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for checking it out if you're new. Today I've got another book review for you. So over the last couple weeks I have read the book Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. This is a murder mystery comedy type book. I picked this up because I actually saw the sequel, Everyone on This Train is a Suspect, at my local library, and I picked it up and then I was like, oh no, this is a sequel. So I picked up the first book. And I both read the physical book and listened to the audiobook, which we'll talk about in a moment. And don't worry, this first half of the review is going to be spoiler free. We'll talk about spoilers in the back half. There will be a warning, time for you to leave when we start talking spoilers. But to get us rolling, the Everyone series by Benjamin Stevenson follows Ernest Cunningham, an author who has a very unique ability to break the fourth wall. Yes. Similar to characters like Deadpool or She-Hulk, I'm just naming some of the two most popular fourth wall breaking characters, Ernest talks to us, the audience. He acknowledges he is within a story, and he finds himself in the middle of his family reunion at a ski lodge. And the Cunninghams aren't just any old family, of course. They are actually a notorious Australian crime family. And so things are made much worse when 3 years before this reunion, Ernest actually had his brother Michael arrested for the murder of a man. And on that night that Michael killed that man, he left Ernest with $2,670,000. And what do you know? But this weekend of the family reunion is the weekend that Michael gets out of prison. And so, as the family convenes up at a local ski lodge, of course, what happens but someone ends up dead. And so, like I said, it's a murder mystery because the whole family are also, as the title implies, everyone in the family has killed someone in one or some type of way. They are various versions of, loosely playing with the word kill. It's like, oh, this family member is a doctor and she failed to save this patient, so she killed that person. But then, like Michael, we know outright killed the person at the start of the book. And so, frankly, this book has a huge cast of characters. Like, I thought I would get lost in everyone and lose track of who is who, but it actually does keep up. And I think Ernest being able to break the fourth wall helps with that. Like, he is like, oh, by the way, this is Julie, the owner of the ski lodge. We haven't talked to her since chapter 4, but she's back now. And that's like, oh, okay. So now I know who Julie is, so we can keep going. And so really the big thing to take away from this book is the fourth wall breaks. The fact that we have a character who could just outright tell us who the killer is from the start of the story, but doesn't, makes things interesting. Because Ernest does play around. Like, he will give you hints throughout the story. Like, for example, a character will say, like, oh, I saw him going to do that. And then Ernest breaks the fourth wall and is like, she's lying. She actually doesn't know. And it kind of adds to that game where now we know that, like, that character was lying. So we further the story. And there are also little hints and foreshadowings that I don't want to spoil in this section of the review, obviously. But a big thing in the book is right at the start of the book, we are introduced to the 10 rules of a murder mystery. And these are Ronald Knox's 10 Commandments of Detective Fiction from 1929. And so they go as following. Number 1, the criminal must be someone mentioned in an earlier part of the story, but must not be anyone whose thoughts the readers have been allowed to follow. So again, we are inside Ernest's head, and so we know Ernest can't be the killer. He even plays with that, where he's like, now this makes me look like I would be suspect number 1, but rule number 1 is I can't be the killer because you've been in my head this whole time. Number 2, all supernatural or preternatural agencies are ruled out as a matter of course. So, again, they rule out that it is a real serial killer. 3, not more than one secret room or passage is allowed. Number 4, no hetero undiscovered poisons may be used, nor any appliance which will need a long scientific explanation at the end. So this is where you can't have anything too crazy or something that the audience isn't going to know what it is. Like, for example, I'm not going to spoil it, but the killer in this story is known as the Black Tongue. And the Black Tongue suffocates you with a bag of ash. And Ernest has one little thing where he's like, oh yeah, they used to do that in ancient times. And it's like, that's all you need to explain it. It's not anything crazy and elaborate. Rule number 5 has actually been removed, as it is noted that it is culturally outdated historical wording. Rule number 6. No accident must ever help the detective, nor must he ever have an unaccountable intuition which proves to be right. So again, that idea of nothing happens by accident. Everything has a reason. Ernest doesn't ever accidentally stumble upon a clue. He just doesn't know it's a clue yet. Number 7. The detective himself must not commit the crime. Obviously. But kind of the same rule as number 1, where again, the character we're following can't have been the killer. Number 8. The detective must not light on any clues which are not instantly produced for the inspection of the reader. So again, the detective, aka Ernest in this story, cannot tell us about clues that we have not already seen. That's where, like I said, he breaks the fourth wall, kind of. Like, they play with the rules in this book, and that's what's really fun about it, is he is like, that's going to be important, but rule number 8 says, I can't tell you about it yet. So keep that in mind, and I'll see you in chapter 32. 9. The stupid friend of the detective, the Watson, must not conceal any thoughts which pass through his mind. His intelligence must be slightly, but very slightly, below that of the average reader. Frankly, there is no Watson in this story, from what I remember. I know I finished this book a couple weeks ago, and I frankly have put this review off way too long. But I'm here now filming it, so here you go. And number 10. Twin brothers and doubles generally must not appear unless we have been duly prepared for them. So no twist reveal of, oh, it's my evil twin brother, because that's boring and lame, unless we knew about it ahead of time. So those are the 10 rules, and like I said, Ernest's ability to break the fourth wall bends and twists them, and he makes note of them, and he'll remind you, like, oh, like I said, I know this, but I can't tell you yet, because the rules say you have to find out yourself. And Ernest does highlight the tropes of a murder mystery. Like, he is like, this is the point where you would walk away, but I'm not going to walk away because we're only halfway through the book. Obviously, the story's not over. There was one really funny fourth wall break I thought was fun, is where he mentioned, because we're at a ski lodge, he makes a joke where he's like, normally in a murder mystery, they would have a map of the ski lodge at the front of the book. Unfortunately, we ran out of time and pages, so sorry, reader. Something I also really loved about this book, like I said, it is funny. The fourth wall breaks are very funny. Ernest is a very funny character because, like I said, he's an author, not a real detective. So he is solving the mystery, and the only reason he knows these rules is because he's a writer. And so, in this story, and so something I thought was really fun about this book was that, like I said, I went back and forth between the physical print version and the audiobook. I listened to the audiobook through Hoopla with my local library. And then I got the book real cheap on Amazon Prime. Inside the book, it will acknowledge pages versus minutes, depending on if you are listening and or reading. Like, for example, right here, in the book, it shows that, like, oh, for those of you who would like to know, a murder happens on page 14, 46, 64, 2 murders happen on page 75, and a hat trick on page 81. In the audiobook version, he says that 35 minutes, 25 minutes, an hour and a half in, and in chapter 32. And so I do really like that they took that attention to detail of acknowledging the audiobook versus the physical print. And on top of that, with Ernest being our fourth wall-breaking narrator, we cannot always trust him. For example, Ernest will misdirect us. Like, at one point he says, oh, by the way, there's going to be a plot hole in chapter 47. Be ready for it. And so you're expecting a plot hole, which is typically a hole in the narrative that doesn't make sense. But the plot hole is a literal hole that is part of the plot, like a hole in the ground. It's a very funny gag. Like I said, the fourth wall breaks is why you read this book. And before we get into the spoilers, I wanted to talk about another reason I read this book is because this book has actually been greenlit for an adaptation over at HBO. But so yes, this is getting a TV show adaptation if it ever actually happens. I know we do that thing where we announce I thought it was going to fall. I know we do that thing where we announce an adaptation and then it never happens. But I can totally see where this would work. Like I said, this book has a huge cast of characters. And Ernest basically spends a chapter or two. The book's, actually, now that I say that, the book is literally split into like sections where it's like my mother, my sister, my cousin, my brother, my second cousin, so forth. Where Ernest spends a couple chapters, or for some of them, maybe just a couple pages, talking with them and trying to get their perspective on how to solve the murder. And so I could totally see where the show would basically have a character of the week, where we have Ernest going through, and while he's solving the mystery, he's kind of paired up, buddied up with one of the family members. Again, only Ernest breaks the fourth wall. No one else breaks the fourth wall, so I could see where that would be fun. The show could play with it. The book doesn't play with his fourth wall breaking. Ernest is the only one that acknowledges it. But you could have something funny in the show where you're like, why, Ernest, who are you talking to? So, no one. But I can totally see where this would play out as like a 10 or so episode miniseries on HBO. And again, it's the first in a trilogy of books, so plenty of material to work with there. It's not a terribly long book. I said 10 episodes. The audiobook is 10 hours long, so if you have 10 1 hour long episodes, then there you go. That's about it. I know hours in a book don't translate exactly to hours on screen, but like I said, I totally see where it could work. And it's not a terribly long book. It's only like 370 pages. So it's a quick, brief read. The text is very big too when I say 370 pages. Like, it's a pretty light, breezy read. I'm excited to move on to that second book. So those are my rambling thoughts. I know I talked a lot about the fourth wall breaking, but it's because it's a murder mystery. There's only so much I can talk about without spoiling things. Oh, I guess another non-spoiler thing I can talk about is I think the resort is actually pretty well done. Like I said, Ernest makes the fourth wall break where he's like, I should have put a map in the book, but I didn't. But it actually, I think it is described well. Like, they do explain pretty nicely where we moved from this building, we moved from the main lodge to the radio station, and at the radio station we can see the parking lot, and in the parking lot is this car, and then we went to that car, and that car then drove off to the lake, which is in front of the lodge, and so forth. I do think the location of the book is very well done, and we don't necessarily get lost. That being said, I do think the book gets a little messy near the end, if I have to talk about the plot without spoiling anything. I think it is resolved okay-ish. I think it's a bit messy. I think it feels very rushed. Like, I feel like we spent a lot of time with the mystery and uncovering these things, and then at the end, Ernest just kind of tells us who the killer is and dumps that, like, the epilogue where we're like, okay, we resolved the killer, and now here's what we're doing now. And so I do think the book is a little messy, but I do think it is a fun read and a really fun listen. Like, even in the audiobook, the person reading it is doing accents for every character, which, like I said, with how many characters are in this book, is crazy. So, yeah, a really fun read that I would really recommend that you listen to if you don't want to physically read it. Obviously, you can always read it. I know people talk about, like, oh, is listening to the audiobook really Yes, it is. You're still getting the story. You're getting the narrative. And in this case, I would say the audiobook is the best way to take in the story. But those are just my opinions. I'm going to move on to spoilers now. So this is your chance to leave in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now that everybody who hasn't read the book is gone, or those who don't care about spoilers. So, like I said, the Cunninghams gather at this resort for their family reunion, and it's a big mess. Ernest is basically exiled from the family. Everyone looks down on him because he sent Michael to jail for that murder because they're a crime family. Why would you go to the police? You ratted out one of your own. And it's that interesting dynamic where, again, we being the reader and being inside Ernest's head, as well as Ernest literally breaking the fourth wall to talk to us, we do find ourselves struggling with who we want to side with, I guess, is how I would put it. Like I said, there are a butt ton of characters. Like, if we list off the whole family, there's Ernest, our main character. There's Michael, the brother who went to jail. There is their brother Jeremy, who's dead at this point, though we're in the spoiler section. Jeremy's not dead. But their mom named Audrey. Audrey hates Ernest guts. She's so mad that Ernest sent Michael to jail. Like, she hasn't spoken to him since Michael went to jail. We then have Marcello, which is his stepfather, who married Ernest's mother after Ernest's father was killed by the police, hence that distrust for the police from the crime family, from the Cunninghams. And so then, again, how could you go to the police? They're the people who murdered your father. Which, again, I thought was that dynamic of, like, it's like, come on, lady, that's your son. Yeah. Oh, but the way she treats Ernest, you're like, come on, that's your son. But at the same time, it's like, oh my God. If there's one thing you've learned, it's not to trust the Australian police. But then we have Sophia. Sophia is Marcello's daughter, so Ernest's stepsister. And she is probably my favorite of the side characters introduced throughout the story. So Sophia is a doctor who is at risk of losing her medical license because she was under the influence while she lost a patient. And so she wants $50,000 from Ernest to settle out the possible lawsuit that's going to happen. And I think she has the best relationship with Ernest. Like, she is playing detective. And that's where I guess you could say she's the Watson, actually. But I wouldn't say she's dumber than the reader. How it says in the rules that she's supposed to be dumber than the reader. But then you have Catherine, who is the aunt who planned this whole weekend. You have Andy, who is Catherine's husband. Andy is like your sniveling loser uncle who doesn't do anything, and none of them like Andy. But of course, then at the end, Andy has his moments where he ends up saving the whole family. We have Lucy, who is Michael's ex-wife. And then we have Erin. And Erin is Ernest's ex-wife and Michael's current partner. Which, yeah, what a turn that is for Ernest. And then we have Juliet, who is the ski lodge owner, and Crawford, who is the cop who is there during the murder and everything. And then I'm just kind of going through my notes. They're not in any specific order, my spoilery notes. So going to those fourth wall breaks where I said are actual spoilers, I love that the plot hole that Ernest alludes to is the hole in the lake that he falls through. A literal hole that is part of the plot. As well as the fact that he alludes to things like that he's typing this book. He's writing the book with one hand, which is because he gets degloved, which, like, I am squeamish about gore in movies and things. I'm not usually squeamish about reading it in books and stuff, but if you don't know, degloving is where you remove the skin from your hand, hence the degloving. Blech. And so Ernest ends up getting degloved when his hand gets smashed by a crate inside of a moving box truck. And so, blech. It's so gross the way it's described. And the fact that they don't have the proper medical supplies, so they put an oven mitt on him. And then he's talking about how, like, oh, the oven mitt has fused with my muscle tissue because the blood has And it's like, stop talking. I thought that was really gross. But again, it was foreshadowed because, again, at the beginning of the book, he says, apologies for any typos or anything like that. I'm typing this thing with one hand. And it's because the other one got degloved. On top of that, I thought it was funny where he talks about, like, oh, you'll see me naked in chapter X. And you think it's going to be maybe a little steamy scene with him and possibly one of his, well, I guess they're all family, so that'd be weird. But they're also not family, some of them. But you think it's going to be a steamy scene, and it's actually because they stripped him naked after he fell in the lake. So again, someone ends up dead, killed by the mysterious black tongue. And everyone thinks it's an accident except Sophia. Again, like I said, I guess Sophia is a bit of a Watson in this story, where she is trying to solve the murder, and she, as a doctor, recognizes, like, this is the black tongue. This person choked on ash. So, Michael is assumed to be the killer by everyone, including Crawford. And actually, Michael's here to reveal the truth about what happened that night 3 years ago. So we learned that Dad was actually killed by the police because he was going to go clean. He was going to sell out all the dirty cops and other criminals in order to secure his family's safety. However, he was killed by this secret organization known as the Sabres. This is the dirty cops and criminals working together. I'll be curious if the Sabres ever come back again, because the way they're kind of set up, you almost think like, oh, this sounds almost like a big deal. Like, this is a big organization. We don't really resolve the Sabres. We kind of just take care of the dirty cops and people we have in this story. So I'll be curious if in the sequels, the Sabres are like a recurring organization just constantly hunting down Ernest and his family. But we learn that Alan, which was the man that Michael kills at the beginning of the book, that Ernest then sends him to jail for, we learn that Alan was the dirty cop who killed their father to keep the Sabres a secret. And so then we have the scene in the box truck where, like I said, Ernest finds the coffin, and this is where the degloving happens, because he gets pinned by the coffin against the wall. It's so gross. And so in the coffin, we discover Alan's partner, which is the man that Ernest's father killed, and hence Alan shot him, and a body of a small girl. And before Michael can explain what's going on, he's found dead. Which I was actually kind of sad about, because we learned, like we said, we meet Michael at the beginning of the story, and it's like, oh, he's got this dead body that he needs Ernest to help him hide. And you're like, okay, so he's the bad guy. And then, of course, he's obviously like a red herring, and Michael is not a bad person. He was actually a good person. He was here to help his family, and he was trying to help solve the murder of this little girl, because this little girl that's in the coffin was this young girl who was kidnapped by the Sabres. And so Michael arranged this whole weekend because he would be meeting with the young girl's parents, as he would have evidence. He would return their daughter's body to them. And he said that he had evidence of who killed her. And Audrey knew about this. So unfortunately, while all this was going on, Lucy ends up dying. It looks like she fell off the roof / killed herself in guilt. Audrey, I said Audrey knew about this. Audrey is their mom, if I didn't clarify / I know it's been some time since we said that. But so the reason Audrey kept quiet on all of this is because she tells the story about how Jeremy, Ernest's little brother, was killed by the Sabres. They took him one day, and they said, if you continue to pursue this, we'll kill your whole family. We're taking the little one as, insurance. So Audrey has kept quiet about all of this because she is still protecting her sons, which I liked that added that layer to Audrey, because, again, she's so mean to Ernest at the beginning. But at the same time, she doesn't sell him out to the Sabres or Michael out to the Sabres. She does still want to protect her children. And so then the whole book comes to a close. Again, this would be the final episode of the HBO show. where everyone's dirty laundry gets aired out in the library. And this is where, like I said, I feel like maybe things get moving way too fast, resolve too much. Like maybe we would need an episode or two for this, for the show. Because we learned during all this that a mysterious benefactor was looking to buy the lodge, and it turns out it was Marcello. And he was aware of Michael's plan and was trying to stop him to protect him from the Sabres. Then we learn that the whole reason Catherine booked this remote ski lodge, even though none of them know how to ski, is so that it could be a detox for Sophia, who's addicted to pain pills. And then we also learn that Sophia stole Marcello's watch to use it to buy more pills. However, the watch had the evidence of who killed the young girl. It had a microdot on it. And so Michael tried to buy it back from Alan, who is the person who purchased it. That's the cop, the bad cop that Michael kills at the beginning. And that's where everything was set in motion, was Sophia sold the watch, which had the evidence. So then Michael had to kill Alan to get the watch back. And that's what set all this whole mess in motion. And finally, this is the part that I think doesn't really work, is we learn that Crawford, the bumbling cop, he's been messing up this whole time. Crawford is actually the killer, aka Jeremy, their dead brother. And I didn't like it. I hate the dead brother trope. I know Ernest makes the joke about it by breaking the fourth wall. It doesn't make it funny. It does make it a bit of an unsatisfying ending, in my opinion. But Jeremy is the killer. He's pretending to be Crawford. Jeremy is the Black Tongue. And Jeremy is straight up crazy. Like, I'll admit, Jeremy is scary. Because he is just like, I researched all of you. And you're all killers. Like the title of the book. You know, he is. You've killed that person in that car accident, and you let that patient die, and you're an actual criminal who strangled somebody to death. Everyone in my family are murderers. So look, kind of this little orphaned child because he was like put in the foster system, and then he started killing people. He killed the actual Officer Crawford to prove that he belonged to a family of killers. And so that's where then he said, I started killing all of you because I realized you're not killers. You're all a bunch of, idiots. You've all killed everybody by accident, like the car crash and the accidentally being high during surgery, things like that. So he was like, so I started killing you all. And that's also where we learned that Lucy, how like we said, she died. Lucy was actually fleeing from Jeremy because she knew she wasn't Crawford. She had gotten pulled over by the real Detective Crawford on the way to the lodge at the beginning of the book. She gets a speeding ticket. So she sees Jeremy and knows he's not Crawford. So she's fleeing from him and she falls off the roof. And so like I said, Jeremy's here to kill everyone because basically you're all a bunch of bitches. I thought you were a bunch of criminals, and turns out you're nothing like me. I'm a sick fuck. So Jeremy tries to kill Catherine, which, if you remember, is the aunt who planned all this. And like I said, Catherine is married to Andy. Andy is the little bitch uncle that everybody hates. Well, Andy grabs, it's either the fire poker or the shovel from the fireplace, and he smacks Jeremy across the face with it. And the book, again, another gross one, is the book literally says his jaw is like a pendulum. Like, he breaks Jeremy's jaw and it's hanging in a bloody mess, like a pendulum. And then, during all of this, the lodge then starts on fire because Jeremy did start the fire. He was like, I'm going to kill you all. We're all going to burn and die together. And so, this is where, like I said, this is like the last 5 or so, 10 or so pages of the book. This happens really fast. This is where, like I said, the way I'm explaining it is how it's moving so fast that I wish we had a bit more time. Like, we could have really gotten into Jeremy. Besides, like, Jeremy is he's just fucking crazy. Versus if we had maybe a bit more to it than that. Like, he grew up with the Sabers, and so he hates the Cumminghams, versus it's just he learned he was a Cummingham and he's crazy, and then he learned they're not crazy. It was a bit anticlimactic. But Jeremy falls to the floor, and as the lodge is burning, everyone gets out. And after all is said and done, Ernest sits with Jeremy as he dies. And it's kind of implied that Ernest maybe puts Jeremy out of his misery, / he doesn't give him any kind of medical attention. And that's where, how, like I said, the story is everyone in my family has killed someone. And again, the rules say that the writer of the story, the main character whose story we're in, can't be the killer. But Ernest doesn't help Jeremy. He does let Jeremy sit there, and he says how he waits for Jeremy to stop breathing. And then we skip ahead to an epilogue where, like I said, we basically wrap up the missing dead daughter / Saber's storyline and saying that the microdot from the watch that has the evidence, Michael actually put it in his bingo card. The entire family has bingo cards of what's going to happen in their family reunion. And Michael put the microdot with the evidence in his bingo card, and he gave it to Ernest at the beginning of the book. So Ernest turns it in, and it turns out that the parents killed their own daughter, and they were kind of set all this up so that then they could get the evidence back from Michael before Michael turned it into the proper authorities. It's it's kind of nothing at this point because it's the end of the book. And so, like I said, I really did enjoy this story. I thought it was fun. I really liked the way the mystery was evolving. And then I felt like it just was like, oh yeah, by the way, Jeremy is alive. He's the killer. And yeah, the microdot is on the bingo card. And, the end. I felt like the ending flubbered. And that's where I do hesitate. Like, I wonder if they would be able to flesh it out or change the ending for the HBO show. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know if you've read and what your thoughts are on Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. I will definitely be picking up the second book as soon as I can. It's that lovely thing where, of course, the paperback doesn't release till January. So I'll be listening to the audiobook until then. If you liked what you saw here, or if you read the book, let me know in the comments down below. If you liked what you saw here and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know when that next one's coming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.